Here's a quick primer about shading and the way to create a sense of depth to make your drawings look more three-dimensional. This is going to be pretty basic and simple, so you'll be able to start using it immediately. But first, what is this image a picture of? Would you say it's a figure? Is it a woman? Is it a statue? Is this the girl who invented cheese? It's an image of a piece of paper with light and dark chalk rubbed on it. That's all it really is. However, that chalk has been put on the paper in a particular precise pattern so that your eye recognizes that pattern as a human figure. But it's still really a piece of paper, just like your drawings. Now, the pattern in which the chalk was put down on the paper was done in a very precise way. So precise that it can encode very specific structural details that a viewer can instantly understand. If you look at the drawing closely, you can see how expertly the artist has captured on paper the texture, form, hair, musculature under the skin, the shadows, and so forth. This drawing is by Pierre-Paul Prud'hon, possibly one of the greatest figure sketch artists of all time and a favorite of Marie Antoinette. You know, a computer at its most basic level processes everything, whether text, documents, pictures, or video, as a series of ones and zeros, and they're called bits of information, and this is known as the binary numerical system. Similarly, all visual information can be broken down into two bits of information, light and shadow. The use of color puts an added spin on the art, but when you understand light and dark first, color becomes much easier to work with and much more meaningful. Most of the time, if you're drawing, you're going to be using white or light-colored paper, and the substance you're going to be drawing with, whether it's pencil, pen, crayon, or something else, is going to be darker. A contour drawing is a drawing where the line follows the contours, which is to say the edges and the details of the subject of the drawing. Contour drawings can be great and convey a lot of detail, but they can also look a little bit flat since they only convey details about the edges of what you're drawing and not about the depth of it. Now, when your eye perceives a three-dimensional object, what it actually sees is the light reflecting off of that object and into your eye. Because the object is three-dimensional, some parts of that object are closer to you than others and are likely to reflect more light and appear brighter, and the parts farther away from you are more likely to appear in shadow. If you're only using absolute light and dark, then the parts of a thing closer to you would be white, and the parts of a thing farther away from you would be black, like this. It creates a very bold image, doesn't it? It's powerful, but it's also a little bit cold, and if it's very detailed, it can actually be confusing. Notice the transition between the light and the dark is very intense. It's all or nothing, and the edges all seem very sharp, don't they? Now, by adding a third, transitional value, we can modulate the intensity of the light and shadow and create softer, rounder transitions. The middle tone is half dark and half light. It's about 50% of each. And each of these three tones represents how far away from you that part of the object is. This is basic shading, and now we have a lot to work with. Try playing with this for a while in your drawings and see how many ways you can use this. Your darkest tone is going to be the farthest away, the lightest tone is going to be closest, and the middle tone will be in between. From here, it makes sense that you can continue to split the tones for greater detail as you need them. There are a few other ways of suggesting depth by way of light and shadow, and the most common are line weight. Darker, heavier, weightier lines suggest darkness and depth. It's an effect that's used a great deal in cartoons and comics, and also in some styles of Asian brush art. It's also used sometimes in technical illustration. Cross-hatching. Etchings, line drawings, and pen and ink art typically utilize only solid lines. In that case, the halftone can be approximated by increasing the density of the lines or cross-hatching. By applying more lines in a particular area, it blocks out a certain amount of the light reflecting back to the viewer's eye from that area, say about 50% of that reflected light, which is the same thing that our 50% gray halftone did in our earlier example. There are many ways to imply shading with line alone: cross-hatching, stippling, which is the use of little dots, and other textures that you can make up yourself. Notice that they all suggest different surface textures to the viewer as well. Look at all the textures the famous illustrator Harry Clark used in this illustration for Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of Mystery and Imagination. If you're just starting out, you can take for granted that the brightest part of the image will be closest to you in the way that we've been discussing. But after you get some familiarity with the ins and outs of shading, you'll begin to notice that sometimes the light may not be closest to you. Also, be aware that in different cultures, different rules may apply. In Asian painting, for example, closer objects are often darker, while distant objects may be lighter, as if disappearing into a fog. Well, that's all for now. Take this and start to play with it, and be sure and give us your feedback. Thanks for watching.